Hello, my art-loving friends! Today we are looking at this Kaweko tin, but inside are beam paints. I showed this tin and these paints and we tested them out just briefly here in my Christmas haul video, which I'll link in the corner and the description box below. So if you've missed that, you can go watch it. There were a lot of fun things in there, which I will be getting to on this channel to play with and share with you guys. So this came with 6 paints. The package had the burnt sienna as a bonus paint. So now we have 7. It also came with this Kaweko fountain pen. And I didn't realize this until I was done using it, but this is blue ink inside of here, which is very cool. You can see the blue color here. Also came with this travel brush, which unscrews and then screws back onto the end. It's labeled Beam Paints, and I forgot to test this brush once again in today's video, but I guess that leaves us something to do in the future. So when I first tried these out, I was not very impressed with them. They were hard to use, at least some of them were hard to use. In other words, they were hard to re-wet. So it was a little difficult painting with them, and all I did was the swatches and I was having difficulty. So I was a little concerned about how painting with them would be. And that was my hope, and my experiment today was to actually try them out and see if they would be okay to use in a real painting situation or if they would be frustrating. So stay tuned for my conclusions. Since I wasn't convinced I'd wanted to start right in on a big painting and I only had 7 colors, although 7 colors is plenty, but this was kind of a limited selection, I decided to start with color mixing. And this is a fun little template that I use in my beginner watercolor class because they start with just 6 colors, and on 2 sheets you can mix 6 colors without repeating any colors. So it's a pretty neat template. I can link that down below, or it is available over on my Patreon site there. So when I was doing the mixing, I didn't have any problems with the Prussian blue, the cherry magenta, or the spring green. The burnt sienna just continues to give me trouble. It's very low tinting. You have to really keep a lot of water on the top of it to get any payload out of it. And the same is true with the harvest wheat at first, but I noticed with the harvest wheat, it'll hold the water on the top a little bit better and it'll let you activate it and keep it activated a lot easier than that burnt sienna. The burnt sienna just kind of lets the water sit on just the topmost layer and it doesn't really soak in or do anything for it. So I think of all these colors, the only one that really is a problem is that burnt sienna, followed by the harvest wheat is kind of iffy at first, but like I said, it worked later. It just takes a bit to wake up. But yeah, that burnt sienna is an issue. So I'm glad I did the mixing because I got to see some beautiful mixes that I could achieve with just these 7 colors. And I got a feel for the paints because I used them enough in each mix that you really could tell if you were going to use these in a painting how they would be, if you really needed a lot of color or not. Also, if you want to see the real-time mixing in action, I have that available for my Patreons. At least it will be available for them in the next week or so. And I also have extra videos over there that I don't show here on YouTube because, you know, they're paying a little extra, so they deserve a little extra, and I appreciate them. So if you want to check out my Patreon site, I have it linked on the screen and I'll link it in the description box below. But you know, being here on YouTube and supporting me here, liking me here, watching these videos, I really appreciate that, and that helps just as much. So thank you. I appreciate your time and hanging out with me. So which of these mixes is your favorite? I actually like the mixes with this Boreal a lot. And it activated more easily than I expected. I expected it to be pretty stiff, like a hard to activate color, because it's, I don't know, it's traditionally one that's more granulating. So in this brand, I just expected it to be hard to activate, but it wasn't too bad. And it made some beautiful mixes. And I didn't use it in today's painting because I just didn't need this color, but it's just a gorgeous color. And now here is a slower, closer look at the mixes. So if I don't hold them up long enough, just feel free to pause the video and take a look. see what kind of colors we can make. One thing with this kind of mixing chart is we're not mixing our mixes with other mixes. So for example, we're not mixing some of our greens with some of our reds that we get in the mixes, but that's not exactly the point of this exercise, but it is something fun that we tend to do in my beginner class later in the semester. But very pretty colors, I think, overall. And from here, I decided to do this painting. I had this idea, but it was going to use a lot of masking fluid, and I figure out kind of a better solution later. But anyway, I'm like, well, I have masking fluid for a reason. I'm going to use it for this project because I just had this fun idea in mind. So lots of masking fluid being used, which is why this is still sped up, but I will be showing you some painting in real time, so don't worry about that. It won't all be sped up. Just this took a very long time. It took just over 20 minutes to get all this masking in, and you don't want to sit through that, I'm sure, but look at how much masking fluid's on this piece of paper. This is an Arches piece of paper that I cut to 5 by 14 inches. Because I was planning on doing large washes of color, I went ahead and dropped some water onto these little colors that I wanted to use in the sky. I was going to let those sit while I put water on the entire piece of paper that's taped down right now, even over my masking fluid, because if you'll notice, on the very bottom of the paper, I did leave some gaps where the masking fluid wasn't or isn't so thick, so that a little bit of that sky color will be at the bottom of the painting too, and I thought that would really help it be more cohesive. I am kind of excited for the outcome. I was just in love with this whole idea, so I am thrilled to have been trying a new idea. It's great when you get inspiration, isn't it? So you can see in real time here that it didn't take me too long to wet the paper and then spread it out, make sure I wasn't missing any gaps or anything. And the water has just been sitting on those paint pans for this very short amount of time, so not very long at all. It had been at least the day before when I did the color mixing, so they were completely dried out, which is great because we get to see how they act by just having a couple drops of water on them for this relatively short amount of time. And I'm using my flat brush there from my Lindsay Weirich collection. That's the Craft Demo brushes that she released. And I really, really like this flat brush. It is one of the best in her set, although they're all good except for the loose ferrules on a couple of them. This one luckily has never had a loose ferrule and has always been really useful. So I'm getting some clean water on the brush, just giving that Prussian blue the best chance it can. And I'm trying to leave it in the little case it came in to see like if I could use it like that, but I quickly gave up on that and I just pick the pan up and use it. And so I am curious. I haven't watched a lot of people who use beam paints regularly, although I did see a video pop up this morning. I just didn't have time to watch it. But I wonder if they affix them to their palette in some way, or do they leave them loose and pick them up like I'm doing? The problem with these is there's a huge gap in the bottom of them. So it may look like a lot of paint, but it's actually pushed up in the bottom, kind of like a wine bottle. Do you know what I mean? Where the whole bottom is pushed into in a concave manner. So it's not like there's anything on the bottom that you could attach sticky tape to or gum tack. Maybe gum tack around the edges, that might work. But I actually really don't mind picking them up. It's kind of fun. It's a very tactile experience with your watercolors. So it was okay, and maybe that's just how I would use them. But if you have any ideas, leave it in the comments below. I'd love to read what you think might be a good way to use them. So you can see I used a lot of the Prussian blue. So the little dots of water that I used on it to activate it were long gone, and I had to dig into the paint itself to get a stronger bit of color there, and it worked fine. And look how well the spring green also activated. I'm getting a ton of color there, more even than I expected, and it's perfect. So 2 colors for sure we have no problems with: Prussian blue, spring green. The only question I have, since they are homemade, is do they make them the same every single time? And will the next pan, if you want to call it a pan, of Prussian blue or spring green that I would get be the same as this one as far as activating? So that's just a question I don't know that we'll ever have the answer to, because I'm not sure that I would reorder these anytime soon. They're gonna last a long time, and I don't feel like I want more beam paints in my collection, at least not at this moment. It would be kind of cool to test some of the other colors and see if they activate, or if there are many others that are as difficult as the burnt sienna, but I don't need more colors, that's for sure. Anyway, you can see the spring green going in there and just making this fun, whimsical swirl, and it's working great. And here's what it looked like dried. There's actually not that big of a drying shift. I was pretty impressed with that too. But this began the excruciating process of taking off all that masking fluid. And actually it came off pretty well. It did take me about a half an hour to take this masking fluid off and then do this next part here. I decided instead of masking the sky and using a whole bunch of masking fluid again, I would try this clear contact paper and just cut out around my building shapes. And I knew my contact paper was old, and I knew that this might not work. In other words, it might not hold the edges that I'm cutting around, but I wanted to try it anyway because it wasn't a big deal to me if a little bit of paint got under the edges. I thought it would give the buildings a nice glow anyway, so it was a fun experiment. And yeah, the contact paper is super old, and it worked kind of like I expected it to, which was okay, but not perfect, but it was fun to do it anyway. So once I got that all stuck on and pushed down really hard along the edges, well, a little bit hard, I just wet all of the bottom again, and I'm going to use the Fall Poplar Yellow, I believe that's what that color is called, to put in some building colors along with the Harvest Wheat, which in previous sessions I wondered if it might be a little bit harder color to use, but I think we've discovered it's not too bad. That Fall Poplar Yellow is really sticking up out of the top of this little pan thing a lot, which makes it easy for me to grab with the big brush, that's for sure, which is nice. And you can see how vibrant the color is, so no problems at all with this particular color. And you'll see I'll grab the Harvest Wheat here in a moment and use that, and it's not too bad either. Now this Harvest Wheat is sticking down into the pan a little bit more, so I have to kind of push the corner of the brush into there, but I'm getting plenty of color. I mean, granted it was activated first, but even right here where it's not activated and I'm just pushing the corner, it is working okay. So I think we're good. I think we're good with the Harvest Wheat. And I decided to go ahead and put a little bit of other color into my buildings here as well, just to kind of pull some of the sky color in. So I think, I can't remember if I put spring green or the Prussian blue, but one of those two colors I end up coming into the buildings with just the tiniest bit, and I love how it turns out. It's so fun, and you can see how the paint is beading up on the contact paper there, so it is creating a nice resist, but it will bleed under these edges a little bit. For that extra pop of color, I grabbed a slightly smaller brush, and I am just sticking that in there, and I'm pretty sure that is the Prussian blue. It looks a little green because it's obviously mixing with the yellow underneath, so that's why we get a little bit of a green tint in it, but it sure is pretty. And then I decide there's no point in waiting for it to dry before I pull the contact paper off, so I pull it off, and you can see how we have a little bit of glow around some of the buildings where the paint has bled through. It didn't bleed through in all the areas, just a couple, and I really liked that effect. So I take my brush and I kind of smear that color out some more, and I apparently do that a little bit later here because I had this brilliant inspiration to bring some of the sparkle into the sky, which I actually had already planned to do. I just almost forgot, so I'm glad I remembered that. And this is the Fall Poplar Yellow again, and it's just real pretty. And then I do add some of the Harvest Wheat just along the outside edges of each of the stars, and then I'll put in a bunch of dots for random color in the other areas of the sky where I have the dashes and dots. And now we get to move to a really fun part, although this whole painting has been fun, and I think the camera kind of turned off when I did the smears along the buildings, so I just brought the brush along those edges that were wet where the paint had seeped under the contact paper and just kind of brushed it out to the sides. And then I'm using the fountain pen that came in this cute little set from Beam. This is a Kaweko. It has blue ink, which I mentioned in the beginning of the video, which is funny because when you put it on this yellow, it actually looks black. In fact, I was convinced it was black, and then I wrote my name and stuff on the back of this painting and realized, oh yeah, I forgot this was blue ink. But you can see how nicely it's working. This is rough paper. It's not technically Arches rough. It is Arches regular cold pressed, but it is rough paper for watercolor paper, rough paper for this fountain pen, and the fountain pen is doing just fine on it. So I just wanted to bring in some line work here and make this just kind of stand out, look a little bit more interesting, and that's what I did. And it was a super fun process. The pen is pretty comfortable. It's the only pen of its kind that I have, and I enjoyed it. Then I was sitting there staring at the finished product, and I just felt like it needed something. And I've really been enjoying the pigment liners that I got from Jazz's bag, his Carryall Studio. I got the Water Media add-in supplies kit, and it came with these unnamed or unbranded pigment liners. And they're really, really nice. It's a shame we don't know what brand they are, because I would love to find them again and probably replace some of the ones that I use with these once they run out. But I took the brush pen from that selection, and I decided to just brush pen by hand a black border around the entire thing, and I love how it turned out. I think that really helped. And here's just a closer look at it. You can see the paint looks beautiful. It's still nice and vibrant where it needs to be. The pen work from the Kaweko fountain pen is really nice. And yeah, my little dashes and dots are a little sloppy, but it's part of the charm of the piece. And I love how we have a little bit of the blue coming up from the bottom. It looks like cliff edges, and I think that's great. I'm glad I left those gaps in the masking fluid for that. And that is a wrap on the beam paints. What do you guys think? Would you use them? Would you purchase them? Thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye for now. So this came with 6 paints, and then the package had the burnt sienna. What do you think of the vacuum? What do you think? What do you think? He's ignoring it. First time we have the iRobot going. Found it at my grandma's house. He does not know what to think of it, so he's going to ignore it. Okie dokie. So much for that. Duffy's like, no, that is weird. I'm out.